One other thing I think people are generally curious about, I'd love to get your thoughts. As LLMs are used more and more, if you look at even Archive, but GitHub, more and more of the data is generated by LLMs. What do you do in that kind of world? How big of a problem is that?
Largest problems infrastructure and systems, but from an AI point of view, it's kind of inevitable.
So it's basically LLM generated data that's curated by humans, essentially, right?
Yes, and I think that a lot of open source contributors are legitimately burning out. If you have a popular open source repo, somebody's like, oh, I want to do open source AI, it's good for my career. And they just vibe code something and they throw it into the you might get more of this than I do.
Yeah. So I have actually a case study here. I have a repository called ML Extend that I developed as a student, I don't know, 10 years ago. And it is a reasonably popular library still for certain algorithms, I think, especially like frequent data mining stuff. And there was recently, I think, 2 or 3 people who submitted a lot of PRs in a very short amount of time. I do think LMs have been involved in submitting these PRs. Me as the maintainer, there are 2 things. First, I'm a bit overwhelmed. Like I don't have time to read through it because especially it's an older library that is not a priority for me. At the same time, I kind of also appreciate it because I think something people forget is it's not just using the LLM. There's still you have a human layer that verifies something. And that is, in a sense, also how data is labeled, right? So that's like one of the most expensive things is getting labeled data for RL back in human feedback phases. And this is kind of like that, where it goes through phases and then you get actually higher quality data out of it. So I don't mind it in a sense. It can feel overwhelming, but I do think there is also value in that.
It feels like there's a fundamental difference between raw LLM generated data and LLM generated data with human in the loop that does some kind of verification, even if that verification is a small percent of the lines of code.
I think this goes with anything, like where people think also sometimes, oh, I can just use an LLM to learn about XYZ, which is true, you can, but there might be a person who is an expert who might have used an LLM to write specific code. There is kind of like this human work that went into it to make it nice and throwing out the not so nice part to make it to kind of like pre-digest it for you, and that saves you time. And I think that's that's the value add, where you have someone filtering things or even using the LLMs correctly. I think this is still labor that you get for free. If you, for example, read an article, let's say a Substack article, I could maybe ask an LLM to give me opinions on that, but I wouldn't even maybe know what to ask. And I think there is still value in reading that article compared to me going to the LLM, because you are the expert, you select what knowledge is actually spot on, should be included, and you give me this executive summary, and this is kind of a huge value add, because now I don't have to waste 3-5 hours to go through this myself, maybe get some incorrect information and so on. And so I think that's also where the future still is for writers, even though there are LLMs that expert can kind of like save you time.
It's kind of fascinating to actually watch. I'm sure you guys do this, but for me to look at the difference between a summary and the original content, even if it's a page-long summary of a page-long content, it's interesting to see how the summary, LLM-based summary, takes the edge off. Like what is the signal it removes from the thing?
The voice is what I talk about a lot.
Voice? Well, voice, I would love to hear what you mean by voice. That's really powerful. But sometimes there's like literally insights.
Yeah.
Like in removing an insight, you're actually fundamentally changing the meaning of the thing. So I'm continuously disappointed how bad LLMs are at really getting to the core insights, which is what a great summary does. Yeah, even if you go, and I have these extensive, extremely elaborate prompts where I'm like really trying to dig for the insights, and it's still not quite there, which, I mean, that's a whole deep philosophical question about what is human knowledge and wisdom and what does it mean to be insightful and so on. But when you talk about the voice, what do you mean?
So when I write, I think a lot of what I'm trying to do is take what you think as a researcher, which is very raw, which a researcher is trying to encapsulate an idea at the frontier of their understanding. And they're trying to put what is a feeling into words. And I think that my writing, I tried to do this as the writing, which makes it come across as raw, but also high information in a way that is like some people will get it and some won't. And that's kind of the nature of research.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is something that language models don't do well. Particularly, they're all trained with this reinforcement learning from human feedback, which is designed to take feedback from a lot of people and in a way average how the model behaves from this. And I think that it's going to be hard for a model to be very incisive when there's that sort of filter in it. And I think this is kind of a wonderful fundamental problem for researchers in RLHF is like this provides so much utility in making the models better, but also the problem formulation is kind of like there's this knot in it that you can't get past. So that's what I think of as like these language models don't have this prior and their deep expression that they're trying to get at. I don't think it's impossible to do. I think there's stories of models that really shock people. Like I think of like I would love to have tried Bing's Sydney. And does that have more voice? Because it would so often go off the rails on people in what is historically obviously a scary way. Like telling a reporter to leave his wife is a crazy model to potentially put in general adoption. But that's kind of like a trade-off. Like, is this RLHF process like in some ways adding limitations?
That's a terrifying place to be as one of these frontier labs and companies because millions of people are using them.
There was a lot of backlash last year with the GPT-4o getting removed. And I personally never used the model, but I've talked to people at OpenAI where they're to the point where they like get emails from users that might be detecting subtle differences in the deployments in the middle of the night, and they email them and they're like, my friend is different. And they like find these people, employees' emails and send them things because they're so attached to this what is a set of model weights and a configuration that is deployed to the users. We see this with TikTok. You open it. I don't use TikTok, but supposedly in like 5 minutes, the algorithm gets you. It's like it's locked in. And I don't like those are language models doing recommendations. Like I think there are ways that you can do this with a language model within like 5 minutes of chatting with it. The model just gets you, and that is something that people aren't really ready for. Like I think that don't give that to kids. Like don't give that to kids at least until we know what's happening.
But there's also going to be this mechanism. What's going to happen with these LLMs is they're used more and more. Unfortunately, the nature of the human condition is such that people commit suicide. And so what journalists would do is they will report extensively on the people who commit suicide, and they would very likely link it to the LLMs because they have that data about the conversations. If you're really struggling in your life, if you're depressed, if you're thinking about suicide, you're going to probably talk to LLMs about it. And so what journalists will do is they will say, well, the suicide was committed because of the LLM. And that's going to lead to the companies, because of legal issues and so on, more and more and more taking the edge off of the LLM. So it's going to be as generic as possible. It's so difficult to operate in this space because, of course, you don't want an LLM to cause harm to humans at that level. But also, this is also the nature of the human experience, is to have a rich conversation, a fulfilling conversation, one that challenges you, from which you grow. You need that edge. And that's something extremely difficult for AI researchers on the RLHF front to actually have to solve, because you're actually dealing with the human condition.
Like a lot of researchers at these companies are so well motivated, and there's definitely the likes of Anthropic and OpenAI are culturally so want to do good through this for the world. And it's such a like I'm like, ooh, I don't want to work on this, because on the one hand, a lot of people see AI as a health ally, as somebody they can talk to about their health confidentially, but then it bleeds all the way into this like talking about mental health and things where it's heartbreaking that this will be the thing where somebody goes over the edge, but other people might be saved. And I'm like, I don't like, there's things that as a researcher training models, it's like, I don't want to train image generation models and release them openly because I don't want to enable somebody to have a tool on their laptop that can harm other people. Like I don't have the infrastructure at my company to do that safely. But it's like there's a lot of areas like this where it's just, it needs people that will approach it with the complexity and just kind of conviction of like, it's just such a hard problem.
But also we as a society, as users of these technologies, need to make sure that we're having the complicated conversation about it versus just fear mongering. Big tech is causing harm to humans or stealing your data, all that kind of stuff. It's more complicated than that. And you're right. There's a very large number of people inside these companies, many of which you know, many of which I know, that deeply care about helping people. They are considering the full human experience of people from across the world, not just Silicon Valley, people across the United States, people across the world, what that means, what their needs are. It's really difficult to design this one system that is able to help all these different kinds of people across the different age groups, cultures, mental states, mental conditions, all that kind of stuff.
I wish that the timing of AI was different with the relationship of big tech to the average person. So like big tech's reputation was so low. And with how AI is so expensive, it's like inevitably going to be a big tech thing where it takes so many resources. And people say the US is quote unquote betting the economy on AI with this build out. And it's like to have these be intertwined at the same time is just makes for such a hard communication environment. It would be good for me to go talk to more people in the world that hate big tech and see AI as a continuation of this.
And one of the things you actually recommend, one of the antidotes that you talk about, is to find agency in this whole system, as opposed to sort of sitting back in a powerless way and consuming the AI slop as it quickly, rapidly takes over the internet. More find agency by using AI to build stuff, build apps, build. So one, that actually helps you build intuition, but two, it's empowering because you can understand how it works, what the weaknesses are, and it gives your voice power to say like, this is fucked up, this is bad use of the technology, and this is good use of the technology. And you're more plugged into the system then, so you can understand it better and you can steer it better as a consumer.
I think it's a good point you brought up agency. Instead of ignoring it and saying, okay, I'm not going to use it, I think it's probably long-term healthier to say, okay, it's out there, I can't put it back, like internet computers back then when they came out. How do I make best use of it? And how does it help me to up-level myself? The one thing I worry here, though, is like if you just fully use it for something you love to do, the thing you love to do is no longer there. And that could potentially, I feel, like lead to burnout. For example, if I use an LM to do all my coding for me, now there's no coding, I'm just managing something that is coding for me. 2 years, let's say later, if I just do that 8 hours a day, have something code for me, do I feel fulfilled still? Like, is this like, is this like hurting me in terms of being excited about my job, excited about what I'm doing? Am I still proud to build something?
So there's on that topic of enjoyment, it's quite interesting. We should just throw this in there, that there's this recent survey of about 791 professional developers, professional meaning 10 plus years of experience.
That's a long time.
Yeah. But
that's a junior developer?
Yeah, in this day and age. So the results here on many fronts are surprising. So they break it down by junior and senior developers, but I mean, it just shows that both junior and senior developers use AI generated code in code they ship. So this is not just for fun, sort of intermediate kind of learning things. This is code they ship. And so it's 25%, like most of them use around 50% or more. And what's interesting is for the category of over 50% of your code that you ship is AI generated, senior developers are much more likely to do so. But you don't want AI to take away the thing you love.
Yeah.
I think this speaks to my experience, these particular results I'm about to say. So together, about 80% of people find it either somewhat more enjoyable or significantly more enjoyable to use AI as part of the work.
I think it depends on the task. For my personal usage, for example, I have a website where I sometimes tweak things on the website. I personally don't enjoy this. So in that sense, if the AI can help me to implement something on my website, I'm all here for it. It's great. But then at the same time, when I solve a complex problem, well, if there's a bug and I hunt this bug and I find the bug, it's the best feeling in the world. It's like you get so much joy, like, oh, it's like you feel like great. But now if you don't even thinking about the bug, you just go directly to the LLM, well, you never have this kind of feeling, right? But then there could be the middle ground where, well, you try yourself, you can't find it, you use the LLM, and then you don't get frustrated because it helps you and you move on to something that you enjoy. And so I think looking at these statistics, I think also the difference is, or what is not factored in, it's averaging over all the different scenarios where we don't know if it's for the core task or if it's for something mundane that people would not have enjoyed otherwise. So in a sense, AI is really great for doing mundane things that take a lot of work. So, for example, my wife the other day, she has like a podcast for like book discussions, a book club, and she was like transferring the show notes from Spotify to YouTube, and then the links somehow broke. And she had in some episodes, because it is custom many books, like 100 links or something, and it would have been really painful to go in there and fix each link manually. And so I suggested, hey, let's try ChatGPT. We copied the text into ChatGPT, and it fixed them. And instead of 2 hours going from link to link fixing that, it made that type of work much more seamless. There was no frustration fixed. I think everyone has a use case where AI is useful for something like that would be really boring, really mundane.
For me personally, since we're talking about coding, and you mentioned debugging, what a lot of the source of the enjoyment for me, more on the cursor side than the Claude Code side, is I have a friend, I have what's that called? A pair programmer. Like it's less lonely. You made debugging sound like this great joy. No, I would say debugging is like a drink of water after you've been going through a desert for days. So like you skip the whole desert part where you're suffering. So like sometimes it's nice to have a friend who can't really find the bug but can give you some intuition about the code, and you're together with that friend going through the desert, and then together find that drink of water. So at least for me, maybe it speaks to the loneliness of the programming experience. That is a source of joy.
It's maybe also related to delayed gratification. I'm a person who, even as a kid, I like the idea of Christmas presents, getting them better than actually getting the presents. I would look forward to the day I get the presents, but then it's over and I'm disappointed. And maybe it's something like also with, let's say, food. I think food tastes better when you're really hungry. And you're right with debugging. It is not always, great. It's like often frustrating, but then if you can solve it, then it's great. But there's also like a sweet Goldilocks zone. If it's too hard, then it's, wasting your time. But I think that is another challenge, though. How will people learn? I mean, the chart we looked at, we saw that more senior developers are shipping more AI-generated code than the junior ones. And I think it's very interesting because intuitively you would think it's the junior developers because they don't know, let's say, how to do the thing yet because they are more junior. And so they use AI to do that thing. It could either mean the AI is not good enough yet to solve that task, but it could also mean experts are more effective at using it. They know where and better how to use it and review the code, and they trust the code then more. And so I think one issue in the society in the future will be, though, how do you become an expert if you never try to do the thing yourself? And I think one way, it's always like, for me, how I learn is by trying things myself, like math textbooks. If you look at the solutions, you learn something, but I think you learn actually better if you try first and then you appreciate the solution differently because you know how to put it into your mental framework. And if LLMs are here all the time, would you actually go through the length at struggling? Would you be willing to struggle? Because struggle is not nice, right? I mean, it's struggling. And if you use the LLM to do everything at some point, you will never really take the next step. And then you will maybe not get that unlock that you would get as an expert using an LLM. So it's like, I think there's like a Goldilocks sweet spot where maybe the trick here is you make dedicated offline time where you study 2 hours a day and the rest of the day use LLMs. But I think it's important also for people to still invest in themselves, in my opinion, to not just, LLM everything.
Yeah, there is. And we together as civilization, that we each individually have to find that Goldilocks zone.